From Holy Trinity Church in Inwood, New York City, welcome to Inwood Art Works On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes that make their home here, what we affectionately call Upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Simms, and today we celebrate the 151st episode of Inwood Art Works On Air podcast. When we hit a milestone after doing 150, we like to take a moment to recognize it. So if you didn't know it, Inwood Art Works On Air is the only podcast dedicated to profiling the artists that reside here in the neighborhood we affectionately and jokingly refer to, as I say before, Upstate Manhattan, which consists of Inwood, Washington Heights, Kingsbridge, Marble Hill, and Riverdale. For this episode, we would like to do something a little bit different and special for our listening audience. Today, the interviewer will become the interviewee. Yes, for once, I am going to be on the other end of the questions. And you might ask, well, who's going to ask those questions? Well, we couldn't have found a more appropriate interviewer to put me on the hot seat. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to Inwood Art Works On Air, my mom, Miss Debby Simms.
Hello, Aaron. This is a great time to be here.
Hi, Mom. It's great to see you.
I know. This is going to be kind of fun.
And she literally just flew in, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, especially for this.
Yes, thank you. We spared no expense here at Inwood Art Works On Air and our luxurious travel budget. Yeah, and boy, her arms are tired. So that's the only question I'm going to ask is how was your flight and how was everything? Because I'm handing the reins over to you now.
Well, first of all, I want to say how proud I am of Inwood Art Works and you and everything that's associated with it. I think it's a wonderful company and just the artists and everything. It's a wonderful situation for you. I want to start the interview with let's get to know Aaron questions. I want you to tell me some of your favorites. Like, Aaron, what is your favorite song?
Well, my favorite song, I'll just go, a contemporary song would be Guns N' Roses' Sweet Child of Mine.
Well, of course, that leads right to the group and the band.
Yes, Guns N' Roses, all-time favorite band, all-time favorite album, Appetite for Destruction, 100%.
Posters, you even in high school tried to imitate the band.
We did and I think, yeah, we did like a putting on the hits kind of thing, lip sync thing, like a talent show for, like a putting on the hits thing in high school.
Yes, with the wigs. And
we had wigs.
It was pretty cool. How about your favorite TV show growing up?
Ooh, so tough. That is really, really tough. Favorite TV show growing up? Gosh, it's hard to narrow it down. The first one popped in my head was the A-Team. I don't know why, but that was really fun. Although a little bit old, I think I watched that with Dad, and so it was more like Dad's show that became my show. I mean, there were so many, like, the must-see TV night was awesome because you had, like,
right.
Cosby, Family Ties, Cheers, and Night Court. Like, I idolized, like, the masters of comedy at the time.
And we all did it together.
And we all did it together as a family.
Really
like,
cool.
we all watched that together.
Mm-hmm.
So,
that was awesome.
So, yeah, I hate to say like that. It's hard to choose a single one, but there were many good ones.
How about favorite food?
Favorite food? Well, being a faithful Cincinnatian, I think it's well, first off, bacon is my most favorite food. If I had to choose bacon, but I mean, come on, bacon is nature's candy, so that's number
Everything
one.
tastes better with bacon.
Absolutely.
on it.
So let's just call that,
right.
that's a carte blanche. But I mean, you can't go wrong with a good old, Cincinnati chili, whether it's Skyline or Empress. You choose your Camp Washington or whatever. You can choose your parlor, but yeah, good old Skyline chili is
But
awesome.
bacon is international.
But bacon's international, and I will gladly eat bacon. Crisp bacon, I will say.
I agree.
Who the hell likes flimsy bacon?
How about your favorite book?
Favorite book? Wow, that's also very, very difficult to nail down. Of childhood or now?
I would say over the years, like probably early on.
Early on. Well, yeah, I think early on, it's funny, like I'll go really, really deep early on. I really liked the Alfred Hitchcock Three Investigators series as like a fourth grader. Do you remember you go to the Troll books and kids? We would get those books and you'd be excited to go to the library and order a book. And I remembered like the Three Investigators, like there was a murder mystery kind of, which is I think is probably strange for a fourth grader to like. But because who's reading Agatha Christie to fourth graders or Alfred Hitchcock? But I think Alfred Hitchcock did those. I could be wrong. But again, it's only been like 30 some odd years since I've read them. But I would say that, and then I think Tolkien, Fellowship of the Ring obviously ranks super high as far as like latter years, and but yeah.
Well, what about your favorite vacation?
Vacation spot or just vacation I've been on?
Probably your favorite one that you've ever been on.
Geez, I don't take very many, so it's very.
Which one stands out?
Yeah. Wow, that's a really good one too, because I haven't had super many. Well, a great one we had was family in Destin. As always, family is super important to me. So I won't call one year better than another, but I'll say going down to Destin, Florida. We'd pack up our van and travel. 10, 12, 13 hours from Cincinnati down, and just hanging out with our cousins and aunts and uncles. And
one year we had 72 people.
My point is we knew that was kind of thing. It's like you meet people you didn't know you're related to. Like, am I related to you? Are you like your same floor? It must be. Okay, great.
Or you're all grown up now.
Who are you? Yes, exactly. And I heard about you. Like you've heard the name in the house, and all of a sudden, and I think that was like they were like week-long family reunions. And so I think our time in Destin as a family, like probably around like the late 80s, early 90s, were like the best times as a family vacation.
What about your favorite holiday? Which holiday is your favorite?
Oh man, other than my birthday, it should be a national holiday. Of course, no. Gosh, that's a good one too. I mean, Halloween was always a great holiday because we'd always have Halloween parties, and it was a great chance to be someone else or be just have
That's
fun.
Right.
And so we'd always have annual Halloween parties for years up here in Inwood, and that was
I think I would agree with that for you.
Yeah.
You always loved the dressing up, the costumes, all that.
It was creative, very
Which
inventive.
leads me kind of to the next question.
Okay.
As a child, you were very, very active and loud, and you always were
I'm glad
running.
that changed.
No, it hasn't changed.
Oh, sorry.
Always running, never walking.
Yeah.
Do you remember using your energy to be creative? Like, well, I was thinking of along the terms of like making plays or making up ball games.
Yeah, I the one that comes to mind most of all is that I remember. I think I was like maybe in third grade, Our Lady of Victory in Cincinnati. We had to do like a book report on something, and you could choose to. Well, it had a bit of presentation of some kind, and I, you're in third grade. Like, what do you know about presentations? I mean, come on. And I also didn't care much for reading either.
That's right.
So two things I know how to do. Two things I know how to make a presentation, and the other thing is that I didn't want to read any books because I was too busy playing and having a great time with my friends down the street doing, playing Ghosts in the Graveyard or Kick the Can, Hide and Seek, or War in the Woods or something. And so I remember you had I think we just got a washer and dryer apparently. And there was, the washer and dryers used to come in these big cardboard boxes that essentially looked like washers and dryers. And we would just, I had them. So, and my dad was very much on the cutting edge, early entry on the window film business, the tinting windows. And so I remember taking a bunch of Mylar that Dad had, probably very expensive Mylar, and Dad would let us use any tools we wanted to. I had X-Acto knives as a third grader and cutting up stuff and essentially creating and decorating these boxes and creating doors and holes, whatever. And I made up a story called like Charlie and the Time Machine. That was not a book, but I told them it was a book, and they apparently never asked. You would think the teachers would ask who the author was. Now I think about it, no one ever did. So I blame the teachers on this one. And I remember the whole school was there, and everyone was doing their reports. And I remember putting like this washer and dryer box, all dressed up like a time machine, as I would have one, and proceeded to play. The presentation would be me doing the story of the Charlie and the Time Machine, which I essentially made up on the spot. That probably lasted about close to a half an hour.
If I remember correctly, they did a timeout.
Yeah, they probably cut me off.
We have to move on.
Yeah, so there's other kids here that have to do their shows, and so the only production off Broadway of Charlie and the Time Machine, and so I think that was pretty. That was a lot of gumption for
a little kid.
For a little kid to do that.
Yeah, you were 8 or 9 years old. Yeah, I remember that.
And I did that, and it was purely all improv.
Right, the creative juices were flowing.
Yeah, I don't know what the heck gave me confidence to do that.
Well, you know, sports was a big part of your life too, and for many years, from little on. And I was thinking about, you know, all your times you were out there in front of people and hitting a ball or throwing a bat.
Or hitting someone.
Yeah, no, you weren't hitting someone.
Well, football.
Do you think this contributed in any way toward your path that you chose?
It's funny you mentioned that. I remember because I didn't start doing theater until high school. My sophomore year in high school was the first time I did theater, and I had been doing sports since like the 4th grade, and I remember finding it when I did the first play, whatever, like, and kind of, I was only doing sports. There is an aspect of like, it's both public forward-facing, and I guess you can put entertainment in quotes because, you know, not everyone was enjoying it. But you were, for lack of a better term, performing your role, whatever it is, on stage, or your role as, you know, the power forward or the nose tackle on the field. So there's that sense of performance, but you know, again, I'm the beholder who's having the fun.
And you never wanted to stop. You always wanted to keep doing it. You always wanted to keep playing or going on. So it's like performing. You want to get up there and be and do. I was trying to think about when you first got on stage, and I was thinking, what was really that feeling of being on stage for the first time? Because it was high school when you were really on the stage.
Yeah. I do remember it. I remember I auditioned on crutches for the role because I broke my leg the day after the football season, and I couldn't do basketball or anything. So, and Dad always stayed late to do his labs, and Dad was the ride home, and so he's like, "You gotta do something." And so I'm like, "Thanks a lot." And so I auditioned for this play on crutches. And I was so green. I remember, it's a true story, like having, like, they call it sides in theater, where, you know, this is your script, and it's the person you're reading with has the same script, you know, just of the same scene. And I was reading with someone, and then they go, "Great, now could you guys switch roles?" I go, "Okay, here." And I gave him my paper, and he was like, "What?" And he gave me his begrudgingly, and I was like, "Oh, it's the same lines. Okay, gotcha." I mean, that's how much I knew. I knew nothing. I knew nothing, and they cast me. And I remember Virginia Chiser was the head of the drama program at Oak Hills High School, and I remember being on stage with that first night, and the adrenaline was pumping, but there was such great camaraderie. Again, the team sports analogy, you know, you knew how the plays, this is how we're designing the play to go on the field. This is how we're designing the show to go on the stage. And you played your role, and you did the best you can. And it was like a game, like I looked forward to doing my blocking or the next thing that I was supposed to do, and didn't want to leave, just like a team in sports, you didn't want to let that person down, and you became a family. And I just remember just incredibly enjoying myself, and I remember it was hot and sweaty and all that stuff too, but I remember just having the best time. And I remember seeing my friends who became my friends, who I was acting with on stage with me in the scenes, and the audience laughing and or whatever, getting through it all. And it was a special time, and you kind of knew where, this was a fun part to belong with.
Well, I don't think that was exactly the defining moment, because you were just having fun with it.
But, that was just fun.
But you did it through high school, and then you did it in college.
Yep.
You decided there was a defining moment.
Yeah.
Did you know when that was?
I remember I took, because you had to take core requirements at my undergrad at Butler University, where I went, Indianapolis, Indiana. Had a great time there. And we were a very small program, and there weren't a lot of guys. But my freshman year, I was undecided. Well, I was liberal arts and science was my major at the time. And I took a theater appreciation class as part of the core requirements, and Dennis Black, who had New York experience on The Equalizer, was teaching the class, and we read something like, I don't know, over the semester, like 24 plays, and you could tell people were dropping like flies out of this class because it was like jocks like me and whoever else were taking it. They're like, who wants to read, right? I loved reading these plays. I loved it, and I asked him after class one day. I was like, hey, is there like I don't know, community theater around here or something like that, like on campus, campus community theater that I could do something with? And he's like, well, actually the directors, I told him like I did in high school, I enjoyed it, but nothing serious. And I remember he's like, go to the directing class, and they're having auditions, I think, for their directing theses, these one-act plays. And I said, oh, okay. So I gave my number to whatever, and went in, and I remember walking in with like my black jeans, my black like Nine Inch Nails T-shirt on, and whatever else, and boots, and the professor brought me in front of the directing class and literally auctioned me off like cattle. Husky young man, about 6'2", 220. His number is blah 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 blah. Should you want to use him for your show? He's available. That's all it was. I didn't audition, didn't do anything, and I got a phone call. And the next day, by this woman named Hannelise Hepler, who, believe it or not, I ran into in Columbus Circle like 4 years ago, randomly. And she needed a guy for her 2-person show, and had a senior in it. And I auditioned, whatever, and I got the role. And it was like a 20-page or a 20-minute play, and I had monologues upon monologues, and here I am, Joe Schmo, nobody, coming off the street, and then the theater major, who's a senior, had like one line between my monologues, and she's like, yes, and I go, blah, 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 oh, really? Yes, blah, 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 blah. And I think when I did that show, and it was in the round too, also tons of pressure because there's no scenery, there's no nothing. There's just you and the person in the round, and I think there was like a baby carriage on stage, and that was the only prop. And it was like a drama. And when I did that for like however many performances that was over a week or so, that's when I knew like I could do this. Like I had confidence going like, well, hell, I could definitely do this. And then I went to Dan Warwick, who was chair of a department, and I just said to him, hey, can I take an acting class? And he's like, no, you have to be in the department. We don't do that. There's no like non-actor class at the time. And I said, okay. And I just sat and talked to him for like 45 minutes about just me. And I think he saw something in me, I don't know what, and just said, why don't you enlist as a theater major next year? And I was like, really? And so I said, we'll put you on probation. And so that's how I was able to take an acting class and start my sophomore year as a theater major. And I got cast, oddly enough, Dennis Black, that professor was casting a main stage show that first semester, and I auditioned and I got a part in it. And I remember seeing Dan Warwick in the hall after that show, and I just said, hey, when is my audition? Because that's the thing, you had to audition to be, it's a very selective process to be in these small theater programs, and I never did. That was the drawback while I was on probation. And Dennis and Dan Warwick, I said, when's my audition, so I can, because I felt like I was on thin ice. Like I could go, like it could have been, because they weed you out sophomore year. You have to do like a thing, and they put you through the grinder, and you can stay or go or kick you out of the department. I said, when is this? He's like, don't worry about it. You're already in. And that was your audition, the being in the show
that was
and all
the
that.
big step.
So that was really the big vote of confidence in saying. So I may have been the only actor to never audition for the department and get in at Butler University.
Well, it all worked for you.
But it worked out, and I think because like I earned it, like I worked for it,
Well, you mentioned the two men, Dennis Black. And
and then of course Diane Timmerman was a huge influence as my acting teacher.
I was thinking about back in the day, like though, who was like the most influential to you throughout all this, through all your days, through your sports, through your acting. There were people who stood out.
Well, who are characters, you mean?
Well, You had characters.
Well, you and Dad, number one.
Yeah.
The number one influence, you and Dad. But Dick Ballard, of course, as a character as well. I mean, you're in the Midwest. There's a lot of characters around, different people. But as far as like people I knew character-wise,
Well, like Dennis Black picking up
oh,
on
you mean
that.
professionally speaking,
And,
like people?
Well, just that brought you along. Even
Sure.
like Mrs. Chiser at the high
Mrs.
school.
Chiser at the high school. Skip
started
Adonsky,
that.
who a senior
Skip.
year, took over the high school program. I mean,
Right.
as far as theatrical speaking, of course, Ginny Chiser from Soup to Nuts. Ginny Chiser, Skip Adonsky, and then
You had your coaches who
all the
who backed
coaches.
you and-
Sure. I mean, of course, I was just talking about drama stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I
had
mean, just all,
David Mold
kind of
and
all
Butler
led
too.
you here, actually.
And then, but of course, like all the coaches we had at throughout. I mean, Dad started coaching me early on. You had little Highlanders people who were great, and even people at Victory who were great. I don't remember. I mean, as far as like singular influence people, like coach-wise, pushing. I mean, Kenny Houck's a great coach who was a senior at Oak Hills with us, and Bob Klotz and those guys were Jerry Dean and Hans and.
And then you went in college. But there's David, the one.
David Mold,
David
as I said.
Mold, yeah.
Like I said,
Yeah,
I couldn't get to him because he came. David came in last, and the Dan Pugh, of course, who did costumes, and then that's the thing about Butler was great is that you did everything. You hung the lights, you sewed the costumes, you directed shows, you wrote shows, you acted in somebody else's show while you directed their other show, or they directed you in a show. But yeah, I don't think I'll need anybody back. Dennis Black, of course, Diane Timmerman, David Mold, Dan Warwick, Dan Pugh. That whole group was very
Yeah, that's
very
what I
foreign
thought
than the
along
Milwaukee
the
Rep
way.
people after that. Were
Well,
huge for me.
it all kind of led you here, and that was a great transition
Yeah,
because you didn't come here right away,
right.
and you worked very hard
Yeah.
at home to make some money so that you could come here.
Right.
Do you recall that transition? How that went? Because
Poorly.
I remember a young boy calling me from New York City saying, "Hey, I'm on the street on Broadway," and then I'm looking up at the
Yeah,
Empire
that came out of
State
Milwaukee. That was when I visited for the first time in '99, because I spent a year at Milwaukee Rep, and that's when I knew I belonged, professionally speaking. Like there was like the pre-chapter, like the pre-Milwaukee Rep, like up to the end of graduate undergrad at Butler. It's all like you knew you wanted to do this, but until you did it for real, like first equity show was Amadeus at Milwaukee Rep, and
But you came here
and then we
and
came
knew
here.
no one.
But we didn't know anybody.
That was
I knew
amazing.
of people. But the point is, like, that's why I said Milwaukee Rep stuff is like it's important to reference that because that's where I understudied and acted on stage with some of the best actors you maybe never heard of, and those are the people who are the real, who I aspired to be colleagues with, and learned from, and tried to give as much as I could back to them, and then so that time of, being a journeyman in the Midwest, like that, those, we'll say from '99 to 2002. Doing the Shakespeare festivals, jobbing, like doing Shakespeare festivals in Western Wisconsin and doing it in Theater West Virginia and doing stuff in Dayton, Ohio, and jobbing around like you're supposed to be doing, and in Cincinnati, and doing the gigs and knowing like, meeting people who hopefully, but I knew that Chicago wasn't right for me. LA never appealed to me because I wanted to do theater, and Chicago was a good theater town, but it just never felt quite right for me. And the actors who I did meet and those gigs around, I liked the careers that, their trajectories. And so, when I came to New York, I remember getting my plane tickets tested out for like 5 days, and I felt at home here. And then made enough, went back to Cincinnati and hustled working 3 or 4 jobs and made enough money to put in my backpack for 2 months, and came here, sublet in Hell's Kitchen for 2 months. And off the plane, I got my first audition from my buddy Greg, who was in a small theater company down at McDougal Street at Manhattan Theater Source. You guys remember that maybe? And we did that, and got the first audition, booked the first gig, and met my buddy who was living here in Inwood. And then when my sublet ran out to Hell's Kitchen, he's like, "What's your plans?" And I got another gig And my second audition, I booked that. And so like the stars were telling me, like, you book your first 2 gigs in New York. It's kind of unheard of. And I was like, this feels right to me. This feels like I'm supposed to be here. And so I've, started hustling for gigs, for day working gigs, and, moved to Inwood at the end of May of 2003 after being in the Hell's Kitchen for like 2 months. And I've been in the same place since May of 2003. In Inwood.
That
and
was
this has
one
been
of the
home
luckiest
since.
breaks.
Yeah.
Because who would have ever dreamed that such a wonderful company like Inwood Art Works would come out of all that work and all the studies that you've done, going to Columbia, getting your master's, and getting better at business too, but would you ever have dreamed that you would end up meeting so many talented people and putting them out there before the public?
No idea. No idea. I mean, I've considered myself a fairly social person, but we liked our private time too, alone and stuff.
You are definitely a people person.
Oh, is that right? You think
Yes,
so?
I think
okay.
so. I can vouch for that.
Oh, you can vouch for that? All right. Sounds
Yes.
good. But no, because that was part of the evolution of the craft I didn't know about. I didn't know that I'd be a producer person. But I always the funny thing is, like, as you're saying, I was the person doing the doer, but then I happen but also the dreamer. And I happen to somehow be able to do both, to dream it and do it.
And it all goes back to that energy of that little boy that never stopped.
Yeah.
And it's turned out to be a wonderful
And
thing.
we haven't stopped yet. So Inwood Art Works is kicking strong here. I think we started we started doing back porch shows, I think around 2012 or so. Literally vaudeville and variety shows on the back porch of our apartment building. Hence the ingenious name. And then, but in the eyes of the IRS and everything, after 2016 was the first film festival. So you can kind of say Inwood Art Works had its roots earlier, and then, in the eyes of the IRS and everything, we started in 2017. But we really started, the paperwork's in 2017, but we really started around 2016. So yeah, we're closing in on 8 years as a real professional, knock on wood, bona fide outfit.
It's awesome. And we're just proud to be a little part of it. Just
Kidding me?
Watching it grow.
You're the big part.
Yeah. Well, this has been really fun.
Well, I guess it was for you. I don't know about for me, but no, it has been fun, and it's a treasure to have. It's a special time.
It is special.
And I'm glad you decided to take me up on my offer to interview me.
You're always trying to get me into something.
Well, you know what? If David Letterman can get his mom to do something, I can get you to do something too. You're both Hoosiers.
Yes.
And so,
oh, yes.
And so that's a good thing too. But,
Yeah.
well, I am incredibly proud. I couldn't do it without your and Dad's support, because I will say this, and for those listening out there, there's nobody in my family in the arts on either side, going back to England or Ireland or Germany. Nobody. So to have your mom and dad support you unequivocally through and through. Not to say they didn't question my choices.
Not really, because you always came through. You planned it, you did it, and it all worked.
And it's still working out, and you're still supporting too. So,
oh, absolutely.
Thank you for taking your time, and your Concorde's ready to go back.
Anytime.
Yes, well, we'll say your Concorde is almost scheduled to take you back to Cincinnati
so
shortly. So I want to thank my mom, Debby Simms, for joining me on this special edition of Inwood Art Works On Air. It's where I meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes that make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now and rate this podcast 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. It really does help. Many thanks to Holy Trinity Church here in Inwood for hosting us, and to hotseat.com for uptown promotional support. And you can support On Air and all of our programming by making a tax-free donation at inwoodartworks.nyc/donate or via Venmo at Inwood Artworks. We need your support, so please help us. Be sure to follow us on social media at Inwood Art Works to keep up all that we do, including the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Al Fresco, pop-up art galleries, live performances, and so much more. And Inwood Art Works On Air is proud to be supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. Our programming is made possible by the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the Office and the Governor and the New York State Legislature. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Simms for Inwood Art Works On Air.